Lee Skolnick, president of the Youngstown Press Club, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. This is an exciting time for the Press Club as we announce our award winners and our Hall of Fame inductees for 2026. I'd like to congratulate David Skolnick, who is being awarded the First Amendment Award. Chad Kospinski, who is being awarded the Excellence in Media Award. Sure. And Lori Factor, who is receiving the Medal of Merit. We will announce the 2026 Hall of Fame inductees on Monday. We have several events coming up, so be sure to mark your calendars. Our next event will be our Members Mixer, August 7th at the Varsity Club. You can find more information and sign up on our website. And the Hall of Fame and Awards Dinner will be September 23rd at Stambaugh Auditorium. Tickets are already on sale on our website, and this year we're offering the opportunity to purchase congratulatory ads in the event program. Our last speaker event for the year will be a program on voting rights and election security on October 26th. More details will be coming soon. Today's event, which is part of our speaker series, is sponsored by the Public Library of Youngstown and Mahoning County and the DeBartolo Corporation. We're so grateful to have their support. Our sponsors make these kinds of events possible. And now I'd like to welcome Amy, who would say something from the library. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much. We're thrilled to welcome back the Press Club for another event, and an event that I think is an excellent companion to the last event that we sponsored on the impact of the burgeoning AI technologies on the news. It is, in the same way, both topics, the First Amendment and AI, are changing the way we do business. And as another person in the community who is working to ensure freedom of information for all of our readers, I share the interest in what is happening with the legal threats that Attorney Marburger will be talking about today. So this is an important part of why we have to make sure information gets out and people understand that the rights and privileges we have today as citizens are never guaranteed, and they always must be defended. So I want to thank the Press Club for bringing these important topics to a wider audience and also bringing them to the public library. We are thrilled to be able to have excellent adult events right now when we are so focused on creating great children's and family events during our summer discovery period. So I hope everyone has signed up for the summer reading program. And newspapers count too. I just want to say that. So thank you all very much for coming back to the library and for all the great work you do ensuring that the community is well informed and about this and every other topic that we work with today. We are thrilled to continue this long partnership.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tony Paglia, President-elect of the Youngstown Press Club. And I'm really tickled and to be able to introduce our guest speaker today, Attorney Dave Marburger. As I look back on the many years I was at the Vindicator overseeing a local news operation, one of the highlights was working with Dave. It's funny, when his name first came up as our legal rep, the Marburger name was somewhat familiar to me. If you are from the Pittsburgh area, you've heard of Marburger Farm Dairy and Marburger Milk. Apparently, dairy farming was in Dave's family for sure. But Dave decided that milking cows and tossing manure wasn't in the cards for him. And we are glad he went in a different direction. At the Vindy, he was our go-to lawyer when it came to libel issues, threats of lawsuits, as well as open records and open meeting disputes, and there were a lot of them. And his take on any problems we had was always on the mark. And I really believe he was so effective because besides being an expert lawyer, I guess he's a super lawyer, according to the internet, he was a lawyer who thought like a journalist, which makes sense because before going to law school, he worked at KQV All News Radio in Pittsburgh during the 1970s and 1980s. Attorney Marburger has been practicing First Amendment, libel, and media law for more than 40 years. A retired partner in the national law firm of Baker Hostetler, Dave has defended the press in more than 110 libel suits and prosecuted a variety of suits on behalf of the press to vindicate press rights under the First Amendment and under state open records and open meeting laws. And wow, the press really needs people like him right now, don't they? He was a founding general counsel for the Ohio Coalition for Open Government and the co-author of a book about freedom of information in Ohio titled Access with Attitude. He's represented WFMJ for more than 2 decades, and besides the Vindicator, he has done legal work for the Plain Dealer and the Pittsburgh Press. In talking with Dave, I know he's very concerned about the attacks on our First Amendment rights under freedom of the press, as well as the pummeling of the rule of law in this country, and thus the title of his talk today is The Legal Threats Reshaping the News. Please welcome Attorney Dave Marburger.
Thank you, everybody. Do I have to turn, is my mic on or off? You can hear me okay? It's on? All right. Yeah, I was delighted to be invited here. I have good friends that I worked with at the Vindicator, that I work with at WFMJ, and some of you are here, and I'm very delighted to see you. Some people I worked with at WFMJ on the phone and didn't meet face-to-face till today, but I've been working with them on the phone for like, 15 years or something like that. But I was born in Newcastle and grew up in the North Hills of Pittsburgh. In 1983, I moved to Cleveland to be a media lawyer. I wanted to represent the press. That's what I wanted to do, and I've been able to do that ever since. And I have to tell you, as standing here today, how much I've lived my whole life in either Cleveland or Pittsburgh, and I really miss my former country. We're going to talk about the press today, and we're going to talk about what the press is having to go through. Let's take a look at this, if I know how to operate this. All right, this was on.
Because people like you, the fake, dirty press, the crooked press, people like stupid Biden, he's not smart enough to know what's wrong, the people that surrounded him, surrounded his beautiful, resolute desk in the Oval Office, what they did to the lives of people, they destroyed people. They sent people to jail who did nothing wrong.
Just to be very clear, there's no evidence of what you're saying, but let me ask you about Todd Lynn.
Listen to me.
Let's talk
There's
about Todd Lynn.
tremendous evidence. There's nothing but evidence. The election was rigged. It was a dirty election. And it's happening again right now in California. It's happening right now in California. Right now, look at what's happening in California. It's 4 days in California. They're dropping fast because it's a rigged election. Let me tell you, it's 4 days, and they aren't even close to coming up with it. You know why they're doing that? Because they're cheating on the election.
Do you have evidence?
All I have to do is look. All I have to do is look. And I listen. And I listen to people, and let's see what happens.
So that's not evidence.
You think it's appropriate
That's how they
that
count the votes.
you think it's appropriate that they have an election and 5 days later, they're nowhere close to picking
State
it
and
up.
local officials acknowledge they are slow, they're urging,
No, they're crooked.
they're urging the votes to be counted quicker. That's how they vote
They're
in
crooked, just
California.
like you're crooked. Your press is crooked. The beat the press is
To
crooked.
be fair, I'm not crooked, but let's
Really? When you play
continue.
right into their hands,
Let's continue.
you're either crooked or you're stupid. You play right into their hands with this stuff. You know that these elections are rigged. Your network knows that they're rigged. You know that I won an election in a landslide, and I got 94% bad press.
But Mr. President,
You know why I
you've
got
never
that?
presented
Because you have no
evidence.
credibility.
But you've never presented evidence to this race. Let's keep going. I want to talk about time.
You have more evidence, there's more evidence than ever presented.
Let's talk
Your
about.
elections in this country, we're like a third world country.
Yes, sir.
Your elections are crooked, and you're crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked, and so is ABC, and CBS, and CNN. You're one-sided crooked network. Good. Let's call it quits, because I have it. Thank you, darling. Have a good time.
Please, I traveled all the way to Wisconsin.
I sat in the rain.
I traveled all the way to
For an hour,
Wisconsin.
on and off in the rain, and I've given you enough time. You want to straighten out your press, because you know what? A country can never be
We
rich
traveled
with a
all,
dishonest
listen,
press.
we traveled all the way to Wisconsin. For-
Was that worth the wait? Isn't it good we have a guy like that who, in an instant, can set off a nuclear missile? He has the self-control and the temperament perfect for being able to push the button and set off nuclear weapons. That's the kind of guy I want leading my country. Now, here's what's happening to what you hear there is how terrible the press is. You're all liars. You are useless. You are a threat to the United States. Here's another guy who's a threat to the United States. Not, but I have to be able to exit out of this. And maybe you should just pull up a chair.
This part should be easy. Are we going to the?
We're going to put this one in.
Okay. Do we need just the video file or the graphic?
I don't need this anymore.
Okay.
So we're going to take that out. We'll put this. There it is. Oh, you mean it's already in?
It's already there.
It's already there.
Already
Okay.
there.
Okay.
And
Can you
then-
read this? That was posted. Well, I think I have the date on it, don't I? Yeah, in March. You guys know who Brendan Carr is. You guys know what the FCC is. And do you know that the FCC has special congressionally provided powers to regulate the broadcast media? And that's because the broadcast media uses electromagnetic spectrum that belongs to the people of the United States. And there's a limited number of frequencies on that spectrum, and so the Federal Communications Commission has the power given by Congress to decide who gets to use the limited public airways to broadcast, and then therefore licenses television and radio stations for 8 years at a time to be able to broadcast, and so has certain powers. Well, after Trump complained about the coverage of the war he started with Iran, on a Saturday, Brendan Carr, the head of the FCC, appointed by Trump, posted this threat on his X account. Oh, I by the way, I hate social media intensely. And this is why. Since when do government officials get to post whatever they want to criticize other people or to say all these nasty things? Since when do you get to do that instead of acting like a government official? Why is it that social media encourages people to lose all decorum, to act like children? Why is it that social media encourages people who are 50 years old to act like they're 15? And that's what this guy's doing. He's 47, but he acts like he's 15. The trouble is he wields an awful lot of power. an awful lot of power. And you'll see as we talk about what Brendan Carr does, he wields power in order to influence through coercion, through threats, what the press, the broadcast press in this case, says about the way our government is operating, says about Trump, says about public affairs. Nobody did this before. How many of you can name the chair of the FCC, any of the chairs of the FCC before this guy?
Just one, Newton Minow. Remember him?
Who?
Newton Minow.
Oh, I didn't know him. So, what he does, notice that he's saying you're using news distortions. Well, we're going to talk about news distortions because it turns out that, well, I guess I should tell you a little more about the FCC. The FCC is supposed to have 5 commissioners, but no more than 3 from the same political party. There are only 3 commissioners there now. Carr, appointed by Trump, and last summer, Olivia, and now I can't remember her last name, Olivia, who's also a GOP, appointed last summer, and then a Democrat, Ana Gomez. There's only 3. Well, of course, if there's only 3, Carr has even more power because he only has to get one other person to agree with them. And that person was appointed by, that person has no FCC background whatsoever. Olivia, whose last name escapes me, worked on Capitol Hill, but never did anything in the communications business, but she's an FCC commissioner. Now, shortly after Brendan Carr became chair of the FCC reopened a complaint that had been filed by a nonprofit law firm that handles right-wing matters, an ideological law firm. And the firm's complaint was against the CBS-owned television station WCBS in New York City. The firm claimed that the station had violated the FCC's news distortion policy when it aired a 60 Minutes interview of Kamala Harris when she was running for president. And I know you guys are probably at least vaguely familiar with the Kamala Harris edit issue. And the claim was that CBS had edited the interview to make Kamala Harris look more cogent. Now, having seen Kamala Harris speak a zillion times, including when she was in the Senate, the woman is cogent. I mean, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I thought, man, she could prosecute anybody and just kick some major butt. She's excellent. So questions about her cogency kind of make me laugh when you have a guy as president who can hardly speak a sentence in normal English. Anyway, at the same time that Brendan Carr reopened the complaint filed with the FCC against CBS over the Kamala Harris interview, Trump filed a lawsuit against CBS over the same interview. And this lawsuit was filed in federal court in Texas. Now, does Trump live in Texas? No. Did the interview occur in Texas? No. Well, how is it that the case gets filed in Texas? It gets filed in Amarillo, Texas, because there is a federal judge there who is MAGA. And he's famous for MAGA. He's famous for giving MAGA suits legs. And it so happens, the judge, by the way, I'm going to name names no matter what happens to me. It's Matthew, and I don't know how to pronounce his name, but it's Kacsmaryk. Kacsmaryk? Interesting thing is Trump didn't allege that CBS libeled him in editing Kamala Harris. The thought of this just boggles my mind as somebody who's practiced in this area of the law since 1983. How could this even be a lawsuit? She doesn't say anything about Trump. She doesn't
mention his name in the interview. He's suing CBS because of the way they edited what she said in an interview to make her look more cogent than he thinks she really is. How is it that he has any claim? Well, he didn't sue for libel. He sued for something equally outrageous as in terms of its applicability. He sued under the Texas Consumer Protection laws. And that is that by making Kamala Harris appear more cogent than she really was, you misled the people who would view this interview, and they're consumers, and now you've misled them. I mean, think about this. This is free TV, right? I mean, what if the consumers lost? Where is the even potential validity for a lawsuit like this? Because normally a Consumer Protection Act works like this. You advertise something, you lie in the ad, but it induces me to part with my money to buy your product, and then we discover that you misled, right? And now I can sue you for taking my money. It's essentially fraud, right? But first, I have to part with my money because I'm induced by your false ad. Now, where is that happening here? Where is that happening? But does Judge Kaczmarek dismiss the suit? No, of course not. So, by the way, Trump's suit, based on the Consumer Protections Act, he asked for $20 billion. $20 billion. That's all? That's, I mean, for free TV, I'm just not getting this. I'm not getting this. In the meantime, however, Paramount Pictures owns CBS. And Paramount was seeking FCC approval to transfer the licenses of Paramount's 28 television stations to Skydance Media. I think Skydance produced the Mission Impossible movies. And that was part of an $8.4 billion merger between Skydance and Paramount. And the merger wouldn't go through unless these licenses for the TV stations could be transferred from Paramount to Skydance. And the chief executive of Skydance, by the way, is David Ellison, who's the son of Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison is a friend of Trump's and is a co-founder of the Oracle, the famous Oracle software company. Well, Skydance pledged that it would review the content of CBS News shows to make sure they were fair and accurate, and also to make sure CBS was not engaging in any DEI. God forbid that we should include more people. God forbid that we should have diversity. What a terrible thing. Oh, by the way, I'm not white. There's Black Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, and then people say white. As though white is the foundational human existence. The foundation is white. Everybody else is a hyphenated. No, I'm a European American. I am. Most of you are European Americans. We're not whites. We're European Americans. We came from Europe. Black folks came from Africa. A lot of people who are called Asian Americans came from Asia. So there isn't like a foundational white. You just happen to come from Europe. And Europeans happen to be pretty aggressive people, apparently, because they take over a lot of other lands. So at any rate, so you have this Trump suit that requires against CBS, owned by Paramount. Paramount desperately needs the FCC, headed by Brendan Carr, to approve the transfer of these TV licenses. And, well, Trump is suing CBS. And what happens? This is a completely bogus lawsuit. Paramount says, okay, we'll settle. We'll pay $16 million. And we'll donate it to the Trump future, not yet existing, presidential foundation and library. Now, how can this be? Well, what happened after that settlement was Paramount suddenly announced that it was canceling the Stephen Colbert show. Stephen Colbert, late night comedian who just rips Trump, suddenly he's not going to be on CBS anymore. And then, after that, and these things are happening very close together sequentially, the FCC approves the transfer of the licenses from Paramount to Skydance. And had the FCC not approved that transfer, Sherry Redstone, who was the majority shareholder in Paramount, would have been potentially liable for about $400 million because it would have caused the merger not to go through, and apparently there was a clause that would have made her potentially liable for that. And I'm sure her net worth went way up when the merger went through. So 16 million, that's chump change compared to 400 million, isn't it? And how did that all happen? How did that all happen? So what you have is a president who claims that he's personally hurt under the consumer protection laws over an interview that doesn't mention him on CBS. And the result of all this is he gets essentially, and to say it's him is not personally, it's not him that gets it, but his interest, the library, gets $16 million. And if he were not president, he wouldn't be able to get $1. So what does he do? He's using the power of government. He's using the giant apparatus of the federal government to pressure Paramount to pay $16 million to his library. He's using the government to benefit himself. He's using the power that he has and the threat that is implicit in that power to coerce Paramount to pay that kind of ridiculous money. And it's not for the government's benefit, it's for his. It's for his. Do you see why I miss my former country? Now let's go on. And we're going to talk a little bit about something I'm sure you know a lot about, the Jimmy Kimmel issue. What happens on September 16th, Monday night, on the Jimmy Kimmel show, he cracks a joke, which I will read to you in case you don't remember it. He said, "We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and then they do everything they can to score political points from it." Enormous uproar. Now, you know, I had to watch that a couple of times to see what was the problem with it. So who is it that should be upset? Why should the Kirks be upset? He's not ragging on Charlie Kirk. If he's criticizing anyone, he's criticizing MAGA as a category of people. Not, as a MAGA, how many MAGAs are there in the United States? Millions? That's what this is the problem, but this created just an enormous uproar. Brendan Carr, our friend at the FCC, the next day gets on the Benny podcast, which is a right-wing podcast, and he says, and I'll read to you what he says. This is Carr speaking. "In what appears to be an action by Jimmy Kimmel to play into that narrative that this was somehow a MAGA or Republican-motivated person, that is, the killer, well, a license granted by us at the FCC comes with the obligation to operate in the public interest. frankly, when we see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action. That is, to change conduct or to take action. Frankly, on Kimmel, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. Well, who does this scare? Disney, which owns ABC? Yeah, it scares you. Disney owns, now, you know, the FCC does not license television networks. It only licenses television stations. But each network owns a bunch of television stations. ABC, for example, owns 8 television stations, almost all of which are in giant markets like LA, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Houston, Chicago, New York City. And so as soon as Carr makes that remark on the podcast, which goes viral, 2 media group owners of ABC station, Nexstar, which owns, I think, 28 stations, and Sinclair Broadcast owns 38 stations, immediately announced they're not going to carry Jimmy Kimmel anymore. Well, I think that comprises over 20% of all ABC affiliates in the United States. That's a fairly high number. So ABC immediately suspends Kimmel. They stop production of the show indefinitely. All because of Brendan Carr's implicit threat that the FCC is going to have a little more work to do on the Kimmel matter. Well, there's quite a bit of uproar, as you remember, and Kimmel winds up only being suspended for about a week, not indefinitely. And however, because Kimmel went back on the air, this created some bad blood between ABC. You might remember that when Kimmel was suspended, Trump posted something on Truth Social and said something like, "Yay!" He was finally we got rid of the guy. He was celebrating the demise of the Jimmy Kimmel Show. So in February of this year, Carr announced. Remember, this is a 3-commission FCC. Carr being the chair, and it looks like the other Republican commissioner never says anything because I can't find any quotes from her on the internet. Anyway, in February of this year, Carr said the FCC has opened an enforcement action into ABC TV's The View show. Why? Because one of the guests on the show was the Democratic candidate for the United States Senate in Texas, James Tellerico. Carr said, well, that violates the Equal Opportunities Rule. The Equal Opportunities Rule is an FCC it's a rule, but it's also by statute that if you turn over your broadcast facilities to a candidate for office, you have to give an equal opportunity to a rival candidate to use the station. But the exception is bona fide news programs and documentaries and public interest kind of programs. They don't have to follow the Equal Opportunities Rule. But Carr, and notice, Carr doesn't wait for Tellerico's rival in the election to complain about not getting an equal opportunity. Carr does it at his own initiative. That's unheard of. That's unheard of, that the FCC would step in and at its own initiative open an enforcement action claiming that some guy on The View, prior to this, nobody thought The View had to even follow the Equal Opportunity Rule, because typically shows like that didn't have to. Well, in April, just a couple months ago, the FCC announced that it's undertaking an early review of the broadcast licenses held by the TV stations owned by ABC. Carr explains the purpose of the early review is to he invokes what's called the public interest doctrine. And what it is that the FCC, by statute, meaning a congressionally enacted law, decides whether you can have your license to broadcast based on whether granting you the license is in the public interest. That is, you're going to serve the public interest by using the public airwaves. Only CAR uses the public interest doctrine to judge whether you are pro-MAGA, anti-MAGA, whether your coverage is favorable to the Trump administration or critical of the Trump administration. And WABC, owned by ABC, New York TV station, filed an objection to this. This is unheard of, that you would, at the FCC, by its own initiative, would require an early review of whether whether the ABC TV stations can have their licenses renewed. And WABC says in objection papers that it filed, this is an extraordinary demonstration of power and coercion directed at disfavored editorial voices, which sends a clear warning to every broadcaster in America, and that is spot on. This is a wild abuse of the authority of the FCC. And let me just tell you, there is such a thing as the news distortion policy, which is pretty surprising. And while Congress has said that the FCC issues broadcast licenses to ensure that the public interest would be served by granting the license, there is nothing in the congressionally enacted law, which is called the Communications Act of 1934, there's nothing that says anything about distorting news. But through a series of administrative decisions that go back quite a while to, I think, 1969, there has developed within the FCC this notion of a news distortion policy. And what it amounts to, what all these administrative decisions, when you add them up, what they amount to is that the FCC has the ability to regulate news where it finds there is a deliberate falsification of the news reports regarding a significant event. Now, that's troubling to me because A, Congress didn't say that. B, when the FCC adopts a rule, it has to go through public hearing processes and with public comment. There's no FCC formal rule that says that, but this is just an accumulation of administrative decisions, and this is derived from those decisions, much the way that in ordinary law, we derive principles of law from a Court of Appeals or Supreme Court decisions. It's sort of like what we would call common law. It is not in a statute, it's not in a formal rule, but it's a practice that the FCC follows. Well, from what I could tell, the FCC has only enforced the news distortion policy one time in the last 4 decades. And in that instance, it issued a letter of admonishment to a TV news station because it had a report about a truck's unsafe gas tank. And apparently the people doing the story attached some incendiary devices to the gas tank so it would go off easier when they wanted to demonstrate it. And the FCC admonished them for that, for violating the news distortion policy. That's the only instance I could find of this ever being enforced. But now, Carr is invoking it all the time against the major television networks. He has invoked this against every major television network but one. Now, guess which one? Yeah, the one that paid how many tens of millions to the voting machine manufacturer? No, those guys get nothing. There's no news distortion policy. They have no news distortion problems, but everybody else does. Now, in the meantime, Trump uses the courts to to do what Brendan Carr is doing. And if I can remember how to do this, take a look at this. Axios published this a year ago. It looked at the suits that Trump had filed either himself or his businesses. And the first one they listed in 1984, I remember that lawsuit. When I was just a young lawyer, I'd only been a lawyer for a year. And I had to use that suit in a motion I was preparing, which Trump got killed in that suit. He criticized as it says, the Chicago Tribune architecture critic. The architecture critic was ragging on, sharply criticizing the design of one of Trump's buildings, which I think was in New York, even though this was published as a Tribune. Oh, was it in Chicago?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, he was.
Big thing in Chicago.
He was. The Tribune published his criticism of the design, and Trump sued, and the case gets knocked out just like that. In fact, in my career prior to 2015, in the few times that Trump sued that I found, or that one of his businesses sued, like Trump University filed a lawsuit because it was criticized. The judges are knocking these out like that. These suits are going nowhere. And to my knowledge, they weren't settled. He just lost. Now, when he becomes a candidate for president, look at how many suits look at that. This is as of a year ago. Are you kidding me? There's 34 suits that he's filed since he became a candidate for president, or he or one of his companies. Now, what's kind of laughable about this is that I have read the complaints in quite a few of these suits. In fact, I saved them because they're so outrageous. This is kind of funny. Almost all of them are claim libel. Well, when you claim libel, as he does, and he sues for 10 billion, every single one is at least 10 billion. One of the things you say is, this has hurt my reputation. It's diminished my reputation. My reputation's been hurt irreparably. Now, let's think about that. So the first one, let's say it's CBS. You've hurt me to the tune of 10 billion. My reputation has been destroyed by you. And then so if that's true, he already has a destroyed reputation. So the next one's against CNN. Well, you just destroyed $10 billion worth of my reputation. Wait a minute, CBS already destroyed your reputation to the tune of the same amount of money. In other words, your reputation keeps getting destroyed. There's such a small number that by the time you get to suit number 34, your reputation must be worth about a dime. So Trump sues the Wall Street Journal, ongoing case. The Wall Street Journal case, now that's almost like suing Fox, which he has not done. Now, because Rupert Murdoch owns both. But apparently the Wall Street Journal hit a very sensitive area, Jeffrey Epstein. And so the Wall Street Journal about a year ago published a report that described a letter and a drawing of a naked woman that appeared to be signed by Trump, and it was in a 2003 birthday book submitted to Jeffrey Epstein. And the message said, "Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." Trump sues in federal court in Miami. By the way, almost all his suits are in federal court in Miami. And he argues he didn't draft the letter, he didn't sign the letter, it wasn't him. He seeks $10 billion in damages. In April of this year, the federal court dismissed the suit, ruling that Trump's complaint did not have was it this one? No, this was a different one. He just simply said that the complaint didn't have a plausible allegation that the Wall Street Journal knew that their report was false when they published it, or strongly suspected that it was false when they published it, which is what Trump would have to demonstrate because he's a public official to win in a libel suit. But that was dismissed in April. In May, he refiled it. So it's still pending. He sued the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation. That's still pending. Also sued in federal court in Miami. This one was based on a documentary that came out in 2024 during the election, prior to the election, but during the campaign. And in this one, the network spliced together that famous January 6th address by Trump to his followers outside prior to the riot. But it spliced two different parts of Trump's monologue, or I can't think of the word, but he's extolling the people to let's go get them. And the clip made it appear that Trump told his supporters that they should walk down to the Capitol, which he did say, and fight like hell. And it made it look like those were juxtaposed in his speech. Right. In fact, they were 50 minutes apart. But he did say those things. And let's face it, what do you think the special prosecutor was going to be arguing? Was in effect, that's what he was saying. Right. That's why he had a federal prosecution ginning up against him. Nonetheless, the people at BBC internally were concerned about what they had done. And in an internal review, they said, man, we shouldn't have edited it like this. And 3 major BBC officials resigned. Now, that gives you an idea of how honorable they tried to be. And Trump learned about the internal review because of somebody in the Labour Party in Great Britain who was sort of the opposing party in their politics, and they let Trump know. So then Trump files a lawsuit against the BBC. Brendan Carr, at the same time, what a coincidence, Brendan Carr sends a threatening letter to the BBC. He doesn't license the BBC. But stations in America that carry the BBC do have licenses. And so he sends a threatening letter, it was last October, to the BBC saying, well, I don't license you, but I license the American stations that carry you. And, just be aware, we're looking at this. And the BBC board then apologized directly to Trump. The board chair, apologized directly to Trump. Now they had, I think, 3 or 4 top officials resigned, but that was actually before Trump threatened them. But now the BBC is saying, all right, we're going to get tough. And it was just a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, they issued 47 subpoenas to Trump's family and cabinet and members of the administration, and they're going to try and depose all these people. And the theory is, well, Trump's burden is to prove that there was a material falsehood in the way the BBC edited his statements. Therefore, we get to find out if what he was really intending to do was to cause that riot, my cousin who lives in Boardman says it was not an insurrection. Baloney. It was absolutely an insurrection. And the idea is, okay, Trump, you have to prove that you weren't trying to start the riot, the insurrection. We get to depose all these people to see if, in fact, that was the plan. So go BBC. Well, in Tampa federal court, Trump has another pending lawsuit. This is against the New York Times. Seeks $15 billion in damages. I mean, it's the same story. Like, how could you have a reputation that's so big that it's worth multiple tens of billions of dollars even after it's been destroyed? How does this happen? So anyway, that's based on some articles that the New York Times published in September of 2024, including reporting that John Kelly, the former chief of staff for Trump, had said that if he became the president, he really would likely behave as a dictator. And how prescient. I mean, really, that was hard to predict. That was like, this is a defamatory statement. Didn't the majority of the country think that might happen? So So anyway, the suit is also, he also has sued the Penguin Random House, which published a book about Trump, and it's written by the same two reporters for the New York Times who published the stories that he's suing for. And that was filed in September of 2025. The court dismissed the suit 4 days later, but not on its merits, but because the complaint is 85 pages long, and it's loaded with just rhetoric. It's just, campaign style rhetoric. And the court said, we've got a rule that says you have to plead concisely with a short and plain statement of the claim. So this is gone. And so Trump refiled the complaint in 40 pages about a month later, and it's pending. Now, Trump also has a suit against the board that awards the Pulitzer Prize. Now, why is that? He sued in Florida State Court in 2022. And the reason, and it's for libel. And the reason for what was the libel? Because the Pulitzer Prize was awarded to the New York Times and the Washington Post for their coverage of the alleged or potential interference in the 2016 election by Russia, which, we know that could not possibly have happened. And so he sued them because they were endorsing the notion that there was some credence to the evidence or allegations that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help Trump. That suit is still pending. 2 years later? No, he filed in 2022.
Oh, okay.
Still pending. Now, you remember we were talking a little earlier about the Trump's issues with ABC. In March of 2024, he sued ABC, and I'm sure you'll remember this, over the This Week program, which George Stephanopoulos is the host of, and George Stephanopoulos does news interviews. And the news and the interview was with South Carolina Republican Senator Nancy Mace, and it was based on the E. Jean Carroll. Does anybody here not know who I'm talking about? The E. Jean Carroll civil victories against Trump. And at that time, she had won $5 million in a jury verdict in Manhattan federal court, and it was that he had sexually assaulted her at Bergdorf Goodman department store in Manhattan. And in the case, the jury found civil liability, Trump civil liability, for sexual assault, not technically for rape. But the judge clarified in that case that what he said, although New York has a very narrow legal definition of rape, the jury's finding did not mean that E. Jean Carroll, quote, failed to prove that Mr. Trump raped her, as many people commonly understand the word rape. That's what the judge said. So back to George Stephanopoulos. He's on This Week at ABC, and he's interviewing Nancy Mace, the GOP senator from South Carolina. Why? Because Nancy Mace has claimed that she was a rape victim, or proclaimed that she is a rape victim. And so he said, well, why do you support this guy who was just found liable for raping E. Jean Carroll? And he said that a few times. And so Trump sued ABC for that. That suit was filed also in federal court in Miami. And ABC, as I'm sure a lot of you remember, agreed to settle the case by donating $15 million to Trump's future presidential foundation and museum, and to pay $1 million to Trump to reimburse him for his legal fees in the case. Now, I have to tell you, there is no way that if he was not the president and if he did not have control of the FCC. There's no way ABC would have paid him 1 cent. That is a laughable case. Laughable. I got to tell you, you take away the power of the federal government that he has, that case is worth nothing. Nothing. And by the way, the settlement occurred shortly before Trump and Stephanopoulos were supposed to be deposed. You know what deposed is, you get cross-examined in a lawyer's office. So they didn't even have deposition testimony in the case, which is usually, if testimony goes south, that might cause a settlement, not a $15 million one, but it might cause, you know, if I'm representing Mona when she was with WFMJ, and she said, yeah, we deliberately falsified that. Yeah, I'd have to say we'd probably settle. Yeah, that would be a problem. That would be a problem for us. So usually, the deposition testimony can influence whether a case worth nothing could suddenly be worth something. Right. But there wasn't even any testimony. Well, here's a pending case. Shortly, I think 6 weeks after Trump sued CBS under the Consumer Protection Act over the Kamala Harris interview, 6 weeks, the same lawyer files a lawsuit against the Des Moines Register, a very, very respected daily newspaper in Des Moines, Iowa. He also sued, and he sued over a story that was published shortly before the 2024 presidential election that reported that a very highly respected Iowa pollster had said that the trend now appears that Kamala Harris may have as much as a 3-point victory in the presidential election in Iowa. Well, he won Iowa, and he won it by 30 points. Right. So the prediction was wrong. The predictor was J. Ann Seltzer, who has been highly respected and published over and over and over again, usually with accurate poll results. He sued the Des Moines Register, and he sued J. Ann Seltzer, the predictor, the pollster. And he did not sue them for libel. He sued them under the Consumer Protection Act. Now, it's the same concept. What are you talking about? Did you buy a copy of the Des Moines Register because you were misled about the poll? Was that it? So you lost money? Did that happen? Well, we know that didn't happen. Of course that didn't happen. How does that lawsuit stay alive? It's in Iowa State Court. How does it stay alive? This is intentional deception of consumers. But in other words, the poll, misled consumers, but he has to allege it misled him. It misled you to do what? To do what? You don't even vote in Iowa. What did it mislead you to do? But that case is pending. It's pending. And because of the evident weakness of like, how do you even have a right to sue under the Consumer Protection Law of Iowa? You're not an Iowa consumer, but how do you have that right? So the right-wing law firm that's sort of the right-wing version of the ACLU got somebody who does buy the Des Moines Register to sue, that person then filed a lawsuit saying, I was misled. Oh no. So what do? Pay him $1? Here's $1. I know you bought the paper, you paid $1 for it, you were misled, sorry. But and I know I'm running out of time, and just tell me to shut up when you want me to shut up. The point here is when you see the Trump interview with Kristen Welker, and he's, the press are all crooked, this isn't really about, this whole problem isn't about singling out the press. That's not what the chief danger is here. It's singling out criticism, public criticism. And how do we know that? Because he doesn't limit his abuses of power and his abuses of the judicial system to attacking just a critical press. E. Jean Carroll is being investigated by the Department of Justice right now under the most bogus of grounds, which I could explain to you if you want to hear them, otherwise I'll go on. Jerome Powell, who he stopped being the head of the Federal Reserve, but he's still a Federal Reserve governor, criminally investigated. Why? Because he wouldn't do what Trump wanted him to do. Gavin Newsom, I mean, no surprise there, he's being criminally investigated. I say no surprise, not because I think he's a criminal.
Unknown caller.
That's Trump.
Somebody read it.
I think it's the Department of Justice. So Gavin Newsom and his wife right now are being criminally investigated by the DOJ. That just came out this week. Adam Schiff, who I have to say, and I'll bet if the judge, Delic, if you've watched him in action in those impeachment hearings, the guy is a great lawyer. I don't know if he's a great person, but he's a great lawyer. The guy is extremely skilled. I would not want to be cross-examined by that guy or by Kamala Harris. Both of them are really good lawyers. Well, Adam Schiff, of course, as a political opponent of Trump, is being criminally investigated. The point is, what we have is somebody who goes after criticism, public criticism, and dissent. Now, I'm going to read to you from a unanimous decision, which is really surprising. The United States Supreme Court, since 2016, how many unanimous decisions has the United States Supreme Court had? Damn few. I mean, really few. This is 2023, unanimous. Unanimous. Quote, government officials cannot attempt to coerce private parties in order to punish or suppress views that the government disfavors. Now, is there anybody in here that disagrees with that statement? Obviously, that's what we believe in our country. And by the way, what was happening in that case? The plaintiff was the National Rifle Association. It sued the superintendent of a New York state agency, and the claim was that she was coercing financial institutions to not do business with the NRA because she was against the NRA's gun positions on guns. Now, this case only got to the motion to dismiss stage. In other words, there was no evidence. The case was decided on whether the complaint adequately made that allegation. And the U.S. Supreme Court decided that the complaint by the NRA was adequate. And that's as far as it got. But the reason I quote from that is that not only is it unanimous, which is impossible to imagine in this divided court, but of course that's a good proposition. Of course that's what we're supposed to believe in the United States. But the question then becomes, why do we believe it? Why is it that we agree with that statement? Do you think they'd agree with that statement in every country? No. Why? Because, free speech, every country has free speech. Anybody can, unless you're mute, you can talk. What does it take to speak? You just open your mouth and say something. But free speech doesn't really mean the ability, the physical capacity to speak. It means that when you do say something that is unpopular or that criticizes the authorities who have enormous power, that you're not going to pay a price for it. You're not going to be punished. You're not going to have the end of your career. Nothing bad will happen to you. When I was a little boy in Pittsburgh, before I was even in school, my mother used to say, we have free speech in this country. Oh, I mean, all right. No, did I really understand what that meant? I knew it meant, and I was a very talkative kid, it meant I could keep talking. I understood that. But why do we care about whether that statement that I read is true in our country? We care because the purpose of the First Amendment is to ensure that we have the kind of culture and society in this country where you do feel free to speak your mind. And we also think that the government, it's better that we criticize the government than that the government criticize us. We want self-government. We want the back and forth. We don't want just a party line or an orthodoxy in our country. We want people to dissent, even if we really don't agree with them. We don't want the government deciding what the truth is. We kind of want to decide that for ourselves. And that's something we do in our country that no other country does it to the same extent that we do it. It's not only liberty for yourself, but it's liberty for society. It's liberty for the whole country. And one Supreme Court justice says, those who begin coercive elimination of dissent soon find themselves exterminating dissenters. Now, I do want to show this to you, even though I know it's time to go. But I really want you to see this. I want you to see what happens. The way I'm going to show you something, and the purpose isn't to say that what Trump does has been done before. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to give you an insight that you might not ever otherwise get to how the people who wield the power of government sometimes think and what they actually do. And when I first read this, it was in 1977, and I was very into Watergate, and I'm still very into Watergate. And I had graduated in 76 from journalism school, where they taught you to be skeptical of public officials. And we weren't indoctrinated. It was just pointed out the wisdom of being skeptical, because the people in authority don't always tell you, don't always level with you, and sometimes lie. And like we were taught, just as an aside, in one of my news writing courses, the professor was a former bureau chief in Boston for UPI. And he said, when we covered Ted Kennedy, he said, and if Ted Kennedy says, I believe da-da-da, we don't write, Ted Kennedy believes da-da-da. We write, Ted Kennedy said he believes da-da-da. Because we don't know if he really believes this. He says a lot of stuff that we question, but that's right. Isn't that really right? Isn't that the way you should be thinking about it? He also said we stopped during the Vietnam War was going on, and at some point the UPI and AP used to refer to the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese, in their dispatches as, quote, the enemy. The enemy did this. They stopped that, and they said, they're not our enemy. We're neutral. We're just reporting what's happened. So we switched it from the enemy to the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese. I happen to completely agree with that. I think that that's a healthy way for the press to behave, healthy for our country. So read this. Take a look at this. This is a transcript from one of the Watergate tapes. And I found this because it's in Leon Jaworski's book. He was the special Watergate prosecutor after the firing of Archibald Cox. He at one point was the chief United States prosecutor in the Nuremberg trials. And so I'm going to show this transcript to you. And I'm not going to read it to you. I just want you to read it. And can you see the whole thing or just part of it? So I'll give you the setting. Here's the setting. September 15, 1972, shortly before the 72 election. Watergate break-in was June 72, a few months earlier. The Washington Post had been writing about Watergate, but nobody else had been picking it up. So other than the Post, there was almost nothing about Watergate, nothing on the networks, and the New York Times had very little about it. But the Washington Post had something about it all the time. And so John Dean is dean there. John Dean was White House counsel, and Haldeman was Nixon's chief of staff. Mm-hmm. So Edward Bennett Williams was a very famous lawyer in D.C. He was for the law firm of Williams and Conley, which represented the Washington Post. So this is what these guys are saying in the White House about Edward Bennett Williams. This is a guy we've got to ruin. So I'm going to keep going down if I know how to operate this computer, so you can see the whole thing. So Nixon wants the most comprehensive notes on everybody who tried to do us in. Because it wasn't going to be a close election, so they didn't have to try to do us in. We were going to win it anyway. And then it gets dangerous. And we have not used the power in this first 4 years, as you know. John Dean, the White House counsel, the lawyer. That's right. We've never used it. We haven't used the power in this first 4 years. We haven't used the Bureau, the FBI. And we haven't used the Justice Department. But things are going to change. And they're going to get it. John Dean, 35 years old. That's an exciting prospect. As it happens, I know John Dean. And I've done work with John Dean in the last 15 years. And when I had lunch with him in 2011 in the Beverly Hills Hotel. And he asked to meet me because he wanted me to do some First Amendment stuff that he was interested in. And I was very familiar with this transcript. And I said, trivia. Who said, I said, when Nixon said, we're going to use the Bureau, we're going to use the Justice Department, who said, that's an exciting prospect? And he goes, me? So anyway, so as you keep reading, the Post is going to have damnable problems because they own, what do they own? TV stations that are licensed by the FCC. And it's going to get goddamn active here. So what happened? Now, why did they do this? Because of Watergate coverage. No other reason. Well, they did go after the licenses. What they did is, there's 30 TV stations in Florida at the time. And what they did is they got Nixon cronies to file objections to renewing the licenses of the 2 TV stations that Washington Post owned in Florida, one in Miami, one in Jacksonville. Well, when those applications to deny renewal of the licenses were filed, it caused the public stock of Washington Post Company to lose 50% of its value. And Katharine Graham later said, of all the things that the Nixon administration tried to do to us, the only one that really hurt, that really caused trouble for us, was that. Well, the licenses didn't get yanked. But you can see the power these guys have and how willingly they corrupt the power that they have. Well, I know I'm done, so I will stop. I had other interesting things, if you thought this was interesting, other interesting things to tell you, but I'll stop it there. So thank you for having me. Hope you kind of like it. So have a good day, everybody. And vote.
And vote. But vote in person, don't vote by mail. That's bad too. Uh-oh, and there it is.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your presentation. This is
Last
our
Schwabel.
That's
Youngstown
gift.
basket. This
Oh,
is your
thank
gift.
you.
Everything Youngstown.
Oh, that's
The
sweet.
last
Thank you.
Schwabel.
Hey, there's even a vindicator in there.
Yeah, how about that?
Thank you. Thank you. Labels, excellent.
The last